When you think of Soviet tank destroyers, the first thing to come to mind is most likely vehicles built on the chassis of the T-34 or the IS. These certainly played an important role in the defense of the USSR as well as the advance back east into the German homeland. However, despite these achievements, these more well-known vehicles have stolen the spotlight away from some of the true heroes of the early defense of the motherland. Today, we will embark on the first of several videos documenting these early self-propelled guns which helped slow the rapid advance of the Nazi forces. Our journey begins with a vehicle you may be familiar with, commonly known as the ZIS-30. Often, the subjects of my videos are vehicles which are known only to a small portion of the tank enthusiast community. This can make it difficult to find examples of how they may have performed when they saw combat, as no one has bothered to find footage of them or it has been lost to history. That would be the case for today's topic as well if it weren't for games like War Thunder, who is the sponsor of this video. If you've somehow watched my videos and still don't know what War Thunder is, it's a free-to-play vehicle combat game featuring over 2,000 tanks, planes, naval vessels, and helicopters, including the ZIS-30. Unlike many other games, War Thunder's vehicles don't have health bars and instead have individual components modeled which you must destroy in order to knock out your enemies. War Thunder is available for free on PC, PS5, Xbox Series X and S, as well as the previous console generation. Try out the game for yourself using my link in the description and get a special bonus to help you on your way to the ZIS-30 or whatever vehicle you choose, including free premium vehicles, premium account time, boosters, and more. Thanks to them for sponsoring. Now let's get into today's main topic. The Soviet Union had experimented with the concept of the tank destroyer and self-propelled guns for well over a decade. It could even be argued that there were several designs prior to the Communist Revolution which may have been considered tank destroyers. However, most of these were little more than concepts or prototypes which never saw combat. For this reason, I have chosen the ZIS-30 as the place to start this series of Cursed by Design episodes on the evolution of the Soviet tank destroyers. Before we look at the vehicle itself though, let's consider the situation in which it was created. Following the conquest of most of Western Europe by the Third Reich, Hitler set his eyes eastward on the communist-controlled territories of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. War would finally break on the 22nd of June 1941 as Operation Barbarossa began and the Nazi war machine began to move rapidly across the border. Among these forces were around 3,000 German panzers, with many crewed by veteran tankers from previous conquests. This was indeed a tremendous force backed by both the Luftwaffe and around 3 million men without counting non-German manpower. Regardless of this, if one were to solely look at the paper statistics of both armies, they likely would come to the conclusion that the Soviets would send the Germans packing in short order. Looking at the number of tanks alone, they had nearly double the vehicles ready for battle on the day of the invasion, with estimates putting their total armored vehicles in stockpile at nearly 30,000, with 24,000 of those being tanks. In reality though, the majority of those were inoperable, with only around 7,000 being able to fight for even a short time without significant work. This was still double the number of German vehicles, and contrary to what some may lead you to believe, the Soviet armor in many cases was superior to their German counterparts. This can be seen when the Wehrmacht encountered vehicles like the KVs, with their thick armor being extremely resistant to the 50mm cannons of the German panzers. This advantage did not result in the Soviets stopping the invaders, but it did hinder their advance significantly. It would not be without heavy losses though, and the Red Army would hemorrhage thousands of tanks, with around 5,000 being destroyed or captured by August of 1941. Clearly, the invasion was an utter disaster for the Red Army, as the Third Reich crawled further and further across their territory, thanks in no small part to their armored forces. What the Soviet Union needed was a cheap vehicle which could be produced quickly. This would in the long term end up being the venerable T-34, but in the early days of the invasion, these were not yet available in large numbers. This is where the ZIS-30 enters the story. The program that would eventually lead to the ZIS-30 actually began in the spring of 1941 before Operation Barbarossa, when the idea of tank destroyers built on artillery tractors was proposed. Several of the vehicles put forward as potential candidates included the STZ-5 and Voroshilовets heavy artillery tractor, with the former mounting a 57mm and the latter carrying an 85mm armament. Most of these ideas would be discarded in early June due to a variety of issues with the vehicles which made them unsuitable for the job. We will see in the next episode in this series that there was another design known as the HTZ-16 which saw production simultaneously with the ZIS-30, but it deserves a video of its own. All of this planning went out the window just a few weeks later when the aforementioned German forces made their unwelcome entry into Soviet land. With tank production now absolutely critical to the war effort, the production of artillery tractors was cut heavily to avoid using up precious resources which could instead be made into tanks. One of these unassuming vehicles to encounter the chopping block was that of the small tractor known as the T-20. On July 1st, 1941, the previously shelved idea of using tractors and trucks for tank destroyers was restarted in earnest. Now, the two candidates for this were the T-20 and the Gaz AAA truck. It should be obvious by now which option they went with, considering the ZIS-30 was not built on a truck. However, this was not the end for truck-based tank destroyers, as we will consider in a future video in this series. Back to the T-20, it was found that conversion of this vehicle to a tank destroyer was not only simpler, but would result in better off-road performance than its wheeled counterpart. The first prototype of the ZIS-30 was available on July 20th, 1941, only about a week longer than the 2-week time frame given to the actual designing of the tank destroyer. This speaks to how simple the conversion was, with it requiring minimal changes from the original tractor. Carrying the 57mm ZIS-2 anti-tank gun, this vehicle certainly had the firepower to deal with its German foes. When firing high-velocity armor-piercing, this cannon could defeat 140mm of armor at 500 meters compared to the 94mm of the F-34 76.2mm, which the T-34 and many other vehicles were equipped with. This made it perfect for a tank-killing gun, as the high explosive shell performance was terrible compared to the armor-defeating ability. It was also noted that if necessary, the new ZIS-3 76mm cannon could be fitted to the tractor. The design was clearly looked upon favorably, with an initial request for 3,000 of the tank destroyers in only 5 months. Considering production of the tractors they were being built on had been largely eliminated, this was wishful thinking. Before a decision was made, though, field trials would need to be conducted with the new prototype. This would result in several improvements to the ZIS-30, so let's now take a peek at what the final production vehicle looked like. The T-20 tractor, or as it is sometimes called, the Komsomolets, was a tracked light artillery tractor consisting of a thinly armored hull with around 7 to 10mm of armor, powered by a 4-cylinder Gaz engine, the same as found in several Soviet cars and trucks, and was essentially a copy of a Ford engine. From this base vehicle, the seats in the rear were removed, being replaced by the ZIS-2 gun mount. Along with the gun, it received the attached gun shield, which, similar to the hull armor, was only around 7mm thick. This was not enough to stop much, but would still provide the crew a reasonable amount of protection. The remaining space was used for ammunition storage and the crew who would man the gun. The driver and hull gunner remained in their original location. Following the field trials, folding legs were added to the back, which would help manage the recoil from the gun. Folding sides were also added to allow the crew some additional foot space. Despite the early expectations for mass conversion of the T-20, the actual numbers produced from September to October was only around 100 vehicles. Part of this issue is similar to what happened with the 57mm armed T-34 project, where lack of cannon production added to the other issues, reducing production. These ZIS-30s were reportedly given a tricolor camo and immediately were sent into combat. Combat performance of the ZIS-30 appears to have been good, with the small size allowing it to easily be concealed, allowing for engagements with less chance of being spotted and receiving return fire. One report claims a single ZIS-30 was able to knock out 3 German vehicles at a range of 2 kilometers, causing the rest to abandon their advance and retreat. As I have said in the past, it can be hard to trust first-hand accounts without the matching reports from the opposing side, but against the German vehicles of that period, this was well within the capabilities of the tank destroyer. Exact reporting of where ZIS-30s were assigned and fought is difficult to find, as they were often referred to by other names, including just being called anti-tank guns. Despite their hasty construction, some of these vehicles reportedly survived in combat for several years, with ZIS-30s possibly still around in 1944 and one even surviving the war, and now on display at the Museum of Military Equipment, Battle Glory of the Urals. There are also a handful of original T-20 tractors in collections in both Russia and Finland. This reported success does not mean the vehicle was without flaws though, with one major one being the engine. The small 4-cylinder engine struggled in more adverse conditions, not a surprise given it only had around 50 horsepower. One unit even submitted feedback on the vehicle to the GAU Artillery Committee, reporting that in combat the gun was fired without folding down the coulters due to, quote, no time to deploy, which resulted in cases of them flipping over. I find it hard to blame the vehicle itself for that, as despite the short length causing instability, not deploying the thing specifically designed to prevent that is really just user error. All things considered though, the performance of the small tank destroyer is remarkable given how kludged it was, to borrow a term from Forgotten Weapons. The ZIS-30 was far from the only vehicle of its type, as we will see in future videos, but it did not really have a long impact on Soviet tank destroyer designs. The design lives on today within a variety of model kits and video games, including War Thunder, as I mentioned at the start of the video. I want to know what you think of this little tractor which carried such a large cannon, so leave your thoughts in the comments. While you're down there, don't forget to try out War Thunder using my link to get that free bonus, and maybe you'll run into me playing my ZIS-30. Thanks as always to all of you for watching, and especially to those of you who have joined as YouTube members. I want to give a special shout out to these members who have been supporting my channel for over a year, which is incredible and much appreciated. That's all I have for you today though, so be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next video on another early Soviet tank destroyer, that being the HTZ-16. Hope to see you there.